This is the FiberLert, and this is so you developed this product, Adrian. Like, what is this exactly?
So the inspiration behind this is um, it's kind of funny. At my last company, the fiber backbone went down. Now it didn't really go down because, like fiber backbones, they have redundancy. But the IT got a notification, hey, this fiber link has gone down. Let's go and troubleshoot it. And I grabbed the first tool, which was an OTDR. Have an OTDR. There's got to be a broken fiber or something, right?
Right.
Um, Went out there with the OTDR, got the launch leads, connected it at one end. It looked fine. We went to the other end. The other end was a pain because it was about 20 feet in the air in a factory floor. And we had to get a trolley hoist and go up there. I OTD it from the other end. It's like the fiber looks fine. Maybe it's the transceiver port. So then I get my power meter. I go to the other end, check out the SFP. That looks fine. I go back onto the factory floor, back into the trolley hoist, back up. There's no light coming out of the SFP. I'm like, are you kidding me? And then, it's like the light bulb went on. It's like, why can't we just have a device that just tells you whether there's light there or not?
Right.
Which is what this is. So the
Yeah.
inspiration from this actually a Vault Alert, which I was trying to find today, my somewhat home office here. But yeah, when we first started off, we actually built a prototype based off the Vault Alert. And this is the first one and only basic prototype, a very rudimentary analog device here. And when I presented this to the organization, they all had big grins on their face and they're all trying to figure out why hasn't somebody done this before? And it's a very good question. Why hasn't
Right.
somebody done
Yeah.
this before? Because it's too stupidly simple. But one of the things in my role at Fluke is being a product manager, product planner, is we talk about personas. And please don't turn off when I start talking about marketing and personas, but we talk about personas. And that's really a fancy way of talking about who is our customer and what do they do.
Right.
And the realization is people in low voltage nation, I mean, they're professionals. There are some hobbyists online. I've seen them asking for help, which is fantastic. But think about your average building which has some fiber in it. Most buildings have got fiber in it. There's an IT guy responsible for it. What does he know about fiber? Not much. What does he have the way in terms of fiber tools? Not much.
Right.
So when there's a problem, what does he do? Well, you do what you do. You start swapping out components and patch cables and hoping for the best. I mean, it's not exactly scientific. And once they've done that, it's like, I guess we're calling in the cabling guys to figure out what's going on. So
Right.
the idea behind this thing was let's give them something really rudimentary that doesn't require a setup that says, hey, is there light coming out of the fiber? And so we went out, spoke to a whole bunch of customers. I tried to convince myself not to do this project. I tried to talk myself out of it. And I could barely find anybody who said, no, this is a really dumb, bad idea.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so ultimately what it comes out is you kind of identify the typical problems. And one of the problems that kept coming up was polarity. We all dream of this perfect fiber cabling system, which is fully documented. The reality is 2 years after you put a fiber cabling system in, it's nothing like it was the first time you put it in 2 years ago. And when you have multiple patches going across the building, yeah, you can end up with a transmit to a transmit or inadvertently pick up an AA patch cord or something. So just having something really simple just to tell you, hey, is the light coming out of fiber A or fiber B? Oh, I need to flip the polarity on the patch cord. So, and the other great thing about this also is, again, I talked about there's no interpretation. One of the things that's actually on LinkedIn earlier is like, well, you can just go and grab a power meter. But again, let's talk about the persona. Let's talk about the customer. How many IT guys actually own a power meter? And more importantly, do they even use it? Do they know how
No.
to use it?
The answer is they don't have one. They don't know how to use it if they had one. Typically.
Yeah, and it was funny because I showed this tool to an individual. I'm trying to be generic as I can because I don't want to name people and shame people. And he was just quiet on the call. And then I said, the thing about this is, unlike a power meter, there's no setup. And he goes, my top phone call I get on power meter support is I tell them to change it from dBm from dB to dBm.
Right.
So in the power meter, you have a power meter, but you also have a relative loss. So you can do an insertion loss. And they're like, it's reporting 8 dB. It's like, no, it should be a minus number. Put it on. So again, for people like myself who've been doing fiber now, I was actually doing the calculation for 25 years now. Sometimes we find ourselves at this level in terms of technology and understanding, but our customers are typically often down at this level here. And it's really important to understand that. So that's really where it's born out of. We took the insides of a Fluke FiberLert and put some fiber sensors on here. The problem with this markup here is when you switch it on, it stays on and it doesn't turn off. And anybody who knows anything about test equipment, when it's small and dinky like this, when you go to use it, the first thing you're doing is finding batteries to try and replace the dead batteries because it was left on the last time you had it. So that was one of the feedback. So then we came up with version 2.0. This is 3D printed. And we took the insides of the FiberLert. And the reason why we took the microcontroller in the FiberLert is after 5 minutes of inactivity, this thing switches off. Yay. What's the most important thing about test equipment? When you press the on button, it comes
on.
So yeah, we put a microcontroller inside this thing. And so after 5 minutes of inactivity, it double beats and it shuts itself off. And I thought, okay, home run, we're done. And then we started playing with it. And, I was waving in front of the fiber and it just wasn't picking it up that well. It wasn't as sensitive as I thought it was.
Right. I noticed that actually.
Had a chat with the engineer. And it turns out that the gubbins for the FiberLert has a 5 hertz refresh cycle. So if you're waving in front of a fiber and you're doing it really quick, it may not pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
So we changed the refresh rate in 2.1 to 160 hertz to increase that sensitivity. But what we're also discovering now that people are using this, let me fire this on. And I see my own sales guys doing this as well, is what you end up doing is you end up like trying to there you go, line it up like that.
Yeah.
And you really don't have to. If you just wave it somewhere in front of it, it will pick it up. So you don't really have to do the exact alignment like this. Is hold that steady, just wave it, and it'll pick it up. And the other thing is you don't need to have a constant steady beep on this thing. I mean, the moment you get one beep, the fiber's live. So the other thing that came out of that, then talking to the customers, is we realized that not everybody has a stable hand and is able to do the alignment. So on the cap here, there is a cap to protect the face, but there's also, it looks like a second cap. It's actually a coupler. So if you've got an LC connector, you can just place the LC connector in there and you get the alignment. So you can do it freehand, or you can actually use the built-in coupler that's on the tether there, which leads on to the question, well, that's great for LC connectors, but what about other connectors? Generally, my experience with SC, you can just freehand this thing. And then in terms of sensitivity, this is where the techies like to find out. It's like, wow, how much power does the source need for this to trigger? The great thing about most enterprise networks is the sources are typically like -3 dBm, -6 dBm, and you have about 3 dBs worth of loss if you're having a good day. So you're down at kind of the -10 dBm region. So at that stage, you can be about that much away from the end face of the fiber and it picks it up. And so when we sent the prototypes out, people were generally surprised. They were just waving in front of the SFP port and it was triggering. They didn't have to insert it all the way in.
Hmm.
But again, the reality of it is the vast majority of FSPs are LC these days. There
Gotcha.
are SCs, the old GBICs, legacy stuff, but the vast majority of it these days is LC. And then, of course, that leads on to the question about MPO. Well, it turns out that you can wave this in front of an MPO connector and it will trigger. I don't know how familiar you are with MPOs, but basically, typically you got 12 fibers as he puts 10 hands up, 10 hands and 12 fibers. The first four or the last four are the transmits. And one of the things I've been playing around with, but I'm not promoting is, again, it's a polarity question. If you bring the FiberLert in from one side and it triggers immediately, then you know those first four fibers are live. If you have to go to the other side of the MPO and then it triggers, then you know those four are live. And anybody who's done any MPO stuff knows polarity. That's the downside with MPO, is actually maintaining the polarity, especially when you go through multiple connections as well. So again, not something that I'm pushing at this stage, but it seems like, as far as MPO is concerned, it's definitely workable.
Yeah. I did notice that this thing had a way to stabilize it, and I needed it for the patch cable that I was using. Like I couldn't get it to pick up for whatever reason, but it seems like you don't need this little end cap and stabilizer, but it does help a lot. So
yeah, the trick is like I said here is what the funny thing is, I gave it to one of our sales guys and he started doing this. And I'm like, that's not going to work. Hold it steady.
Yeah.
And you know, I've got the cap on here and it's still picking it up. And it's like he said, he's like, oh, you just got it to beep briefly. It doesn't matter. It beeped once. I know it's live.
Exactly.
That's all I need to know.
Yeah. Right.
I was watching some of the comments on social media and they're like, oh, that's no use to me. I use a VFL. And it's like, absolutely, VFL is your go-to tool, absolutely every time. But also at the same time is it doesn't tell you whether you've got any light coming out of the fiber. It just tells you whether you're on the right fiber or not. So this doesn't replace a VFL. I think it complements a VFL. But again, it goes back to talking about the persona, the
avatar, yeah.
Dealing with fiber. And the great thing about that is you're really empowering that IT guy to do some basic troubleshooting before he calls in the professionals.
Right.
And figure out, get his link back up and running.
Yep. So your name came up a couple times. It was interesting because somebody from Fluke reached out to me and they wanted to send me one of these things to check out, which was awesome. And then I asked Lee Renfro. I don't know if you know Lee Renfro.
Lee, I'll be seeing him in February. He's a Bixie judge. I'll be judging at the Bixie Skills Challenge again down in Orlando next year.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I actually have a booth right next to the Cabling Skills Challenge, and I'll be doing Lee and I are doing the Wednesday keynote address.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we're doing a live podcast at the Bixie conference on Wednesday. So yeah, it's gonna be.
I actually get to meet you in person.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm excited. Haven't been to a Bixie conference, but now I'm doing a keynote.
No pressure.
Yeah, exactly. We'll be there doing video content for the Cabling Skills Challenge, and then I'll have a little booth set up and do like live podcasts. So it's going to be a pretty interesting experience. I'm excited for it. But back to Lee. So Lee said, oh, Fluke reached out to you. You should get Adrian Young on the show, on the podcast. And then they came back and said, hey, yeah, we got your guy. We volunteered. We voluntold Adrian to get on the show for you. So it seems like you're kind of like a well-known dude in the industry. Tell me what your role is at Fluke and how'd you end up there? Just a brief history real quick.
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm the product manager planner. So I'm responsible for the current, past, and future endeavors in terms of fiber certification. Answering that question, how did I get here? It's an interesting story. It goes all the way back to 1986, and I joined a company called Krone. Not that well known in the US, but the rest of the world extremely well known. That's the punch time blocks. And around about 1992, someone walked into the lab and said, we needed to do 100 megabits. And I'm like, on copper? And I'm like, you're crazy. You can't do 100 megs on copper. Well, set a project together. We had an RJ45 connector, which is Cat3. And they were like, can we modify this and make it this new Cat5? And so I took the connector home in the kitchen table with a Dremel and modifying it. And I figured out a way to do it by flipping it, by basically crossing the contacts inside. It was a team effort, did such a good job that when Cat 5e came along, we didn't have to do anything. It still met the Cat 5e requirement, which was really quite remarkable because even at that stage, people were struggling to figure out how to do a Cat 5 connector. So then from that, the company said, we need to offer a cabling system warranty. And started working with Belden and Alcatel, creating a hybrid cabling system warranty, built my own test bed, did all the testing. And then 1996, had a little chat with Fluke, and it seemed an obvious place to go to. I spent a lot of time doing testing. So hired into Fluke in the UK in 1996. Ended up becoming a European segment manager, but we'll keep that on the DL. I don't want anybody thinking I'm that important or that clever. And then in 2000, a little bit burnt out. So I went to work for an awesome company in Yorkshire called TT, where I really learned about fiber. Those guys were awesome when it comes to fiber. And then in 2001, I had the opportunity to get an H-1B visa, which is pretty tough to get, and come and work here in the US for Fluke. So you know about that. So yeah, came across here in 2001, just at the height of the dot bomb, the dot-com dot bomb. Yeah, the dot bombers, and my boss picking me up at the gate. Remember that, when you could meet people at the gate? And he's like, "Oh, you probably don't know." And I'm like, "I've been canned already." And actually, he said, "No, we bought Microtest." So I don't know if you remember the company Microtest, but they were the announcement for that acquisition was made 2 hours after I got on the plane and left for the US.
Oh wow!
So that was quite a shock landing. Going like, okay then. And so, yeah, came across as a product specialist and then ended up in the technical assistance center. And then I think 2007 was my first public speaking at Bixie in Vegas. Turns out that I'm actually a pretty good public speaker, so I'm told. And I've traveled the world doing that. I've lived so far a pretty privileged life. Somebody on Facebook a little while ago put up like 50 countries, 50 cities. Like, how many of these you've been to? And I counted 43. Spent a lot of time in the air, to the point where when I got through immigration and SeaTac, they would actually recognize me. The 1 year I didn't go to Singapore, he's looking at my passport and like, no Singapore this year.
Oh wow!
Yeah, a real frequent traveler. So I guess, with magazines, industry associations, and traveling the world, and being in the industry now for 30 years, which I can't believe, and I'm not going to tell you how old I am. But yeah, I guess that's how people, know me. But hopefully there's some people watching this like, who is this guy? Why don't I know him? And I'm sure there are. There's always people who think, oh, Adrian. That's not true.
Yeah, there's a lot.
There's quite a few people out there who still don't know.
Yeah, there's a whole new wave of technicians coming in. Like they hardly know like anybody in the industry. I think there's like this weird gap. There's all these kind of older people, the Big C crowd and everything, and then there's this whole new wave of technicians that we're trying to get to learn about fiber and learn about how to use the OTDR and get one of these things. So yeah, there's a lot of people coming up in the industry, and we need more actually.
We definitely need more, and I'm a big fan of education. I know there's some controversy about certain training organizations that are for profit and everything else. But I worked for a training organization in the UK, and my wish is that anybody working in fiber just does a basic fundamentals theory of fiber course and actually understand how that level what impacts it, and what's the limitations. Because if you get that foundation, then when a smart ass like me comes along and starts talking at this level, you're going to start understanding what I'm talking about. The concern I've got at the moment, and it's unfortunate, and I'm not blaming the individuals, is when you ask them, where do you get your training from? Well, from Bob. Bob's been at the company for 5 years. Where
Oh
did
no.
Bob get his training from? From Jeff. And
Jeff.
so you've got you got you got this like drop down knowledge which gets watered every time. And I just, when I see some of these folks being put in this position, I kind of feel bad for them. There's been numerous jobs I've gone to try and troubleshoot, and it's just been a disaster. And I've turned around to the project manager and I'm like, I know there is one guy in this company who knows this stuff, and you probably don't like him because he's telling you all the time you're doing it wrong. You need to get this guy here.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was one incident where they called the guy in, and I said, look, there's a scratch across the core. And the project manager like, no, there isn't. It stops at the cladding. It stops on the outside on the ferrule. And then the expert guy was like, no, you see it on the ferrule on the white. Do you see the scratch coming out the other side as well on the cladding? Yeah, because you can't always see the scratch going through the core. And so that was an amusing incident. There was like, you need to start listening to this guy. You can't just wing it.
Yeah. What do you recommend for training? Are there any particular governing bodies or any type of schools you recommend?
Yeah. So one of the unfortunate things, and I think you know this more than I do, it's largely an unregulated industry.
Yeah.
Um, Certainly, most states like Washington State, you've got to have a low voltage license. Um, you know, prove your 5 years and get your low voltage license. But regulatory requirements, there really isn't anything. So when it comes to training, you got the usual. You got the free training, and when it's free. Um, and you can get that from the cabling manufacturers. So you sign up to a cabling
Right.
manufacturer to sell a product, get their warranty. You can go on their training courses. Some are really good, some are okay. But a lot of the time, and I got to be careful with my language here. It's a bit like trying to fit 12 pounds of dog doodah in a 5 pound bag.
Yeah.
It's they're just trying to do too much in one day. And again, I'm not blaming the cable manufacturers. Maybe I'll blame the company owners who are sending them there, going like, yeah, he can go for a day, but not two. I mean, there's only so much you can do in a day. So there are a number of organizations. We talked about Bixie. That's kind of the high end, and you can get accreditations and what have you. There are companies like Light Brigade. That's actually located not too far from where I live, down in Tukwila. They do a very nice introductory course, and then you can step it up one level so you can graduate your knowledge. That's certainly the case here in the US. And there's the Fiber Optic Association as well.
Hmm.
They authorize trainers to deliver their course. So we're not short on availability of
Hmm.
courses. I think the really big challenge is availability of time. Do you have the time to send a tech on a 2 day course? And if that course is not local and it's across the country, then you're paying for flights, hotels, and how much beer they can drink when they get there, or wine, depending on what your tour is.
Yeah.
So I wrote the training course for Fluke for CCTT, and one of the things that became evident very quickly is they love the course, but it's pulling people out of the field for 2 days on a course, maybe 3 or 4 days, including travel time, which is why one of our training providers, a guy called Mike Panaki, he's a protocol specialist, he got really nerdy and he's taken the course online, and he has all the Versiv testers on a rack, and you can actually remotely control them from your desk.
Interesting.
So, you there are limitations in doing that. I mean, you still have that practical element, but there are limitations. But it helps us reach a wider audience and get understanding of what's going on.
That was one of my next questions was, can you do it in a virtual lab environment? Is that an option? And let me change the battery in my camera. Sorry about that. I'm still here. But go ahead and answer that question if you heard it.
You can to a certain extent. When it comes to copper, yes, absolutely. Copper certification, you can do it in a virtual environment as long as it's not a PowerPoint deck. I mean,
Right.
you need the student interaction going on with the tester. When it comes to fiber, it's a different story because you can talk about cleaning, but until you've tried to clean the end face of a fiber, you can't feel it. And that's the one things that Mike is working on at the moment is maybe sending out a basic kit.
Hmm.
So when they're actually running the course remotely with their camera on, they can actually physically do the cleaning and do the referencing. So for copper you can do virtually pretty well. When it
Yeah.
comes to fiber, yeah, you really got to do the in person. And of course, with everything on at the moment as well. Again, it's challenging. It's extremely problematic.
Yeah, but yeah, because we're doing some fiber optic association courses, and we're kicking around the idea of doing it virtual in some sort of like lab environment, and then there's the whole metaverse thing with the glasses and all that. So that might be an option. Who knows? But like you say, it's just so tactile. You have to get the feel for cleaning it and putting it and splicing it. It's a completely different beast.
And you can't watch. I mean, when I've done this over the years, one of the best things about the training side is standing back and watching and observing and seeing what they're doing. I mean, I had one gentleman in case he was cleaning a fiber, so he had his wipe and he put the little bit of solvent on there, and he's doing this, and he's like, I can't get this clean, and I'm watching him, and I'm like, well, I know what you're doing wrong. Because what am I doing wrong? So he's got the Kim wipe, and it's actually on his desk, and he's holding it down with his palm. And I'm like, the oils are coming off your palm and going into the Kim wipe. So when you're cleaning across the Kim wipe, you're taking the oils off your hand and putting them on the end face. So he got a clean wipe, did it, and it worked perfectly. But 5 minutes later, I saw him again, put his hand back on there. And then he starts dropping F bombs. And I'm like, did you put your hand on the Kim wipe? And he's like, maybe. Let's get a new Kim wipe. And then everything's fine. That's the thing that you can't get across in a virtual situation, and you need time. You need to give them space to figure out what works for them. Because, well, as you can see by a lot of the photos that are posted online, it's not always a classroom situation.
Right.
You can be in some really interesting places. I mean, I've been under Hoosier Stadium with dumper trucks running by and they're trying to splice fiber. I mean, at that stage, you need a tent, you need negative air. I mean, it becomes challenging at that stage. But yeah, to answer your question, you can do a certain amount in a virtual environment, but honestly, like I said, because it's tactile, you need an in-person training session. Now, some of the larger installers out there actually have their own training organizations within their companies. There's a
Right.
company locally nearby. They have their own, it's a gorgeous training room, and they have a certified trainer. So when they bring people on, they get a whole week in there doing training before they're let loose in the field. Of course, they're super in the field. Certain companies really recognize that, yeah, we need hands on. This is a good investment.
Yep. So I got a few more questions, and we'll kind of wrap this up. Is there any particular advice you would give like a technician that's starting out? Because obviously you have a lot of hands-on experience. Is there anything that like what's the first step that they would take to be successful in the field and get trained up or get the tools, or like what's the first kind of step that you would recommend?
Um, you need to find a mentor. You know that, that's going to be the success. If you can find a mentor that will have the patience and teach you all the tips and tricks, I think that would be my main thing. And the reason why I say that, as I speak that from personal experience, 35 years in the industry, a lot of it at Fluke. How did I gain this knowledge? I've had some fantastic mentors over the years. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
just a pure genius and have no issue sitting down and trying to explain stuff to an idiot like me. And I've had to ask several questions. But yeah, I think get yourself a mentor, get yourself somebody who's willing to spend time with you and relay that knowledge and that experience. I think that would be my primary one.
Yeah, I love that advice. I've never had a mentor, like a one particular mentor, but what I did is I built Low Voltage Nation, and that's my mentorship program. And I interview people like you and learn from you guys. So this is like it's a selfish thing for me.
And yeah, but at the same time is, and I'm still learning.
Always.
And sometimes I'm aware across as arrogant and I know it all. I don't. I do not know it all. And I guess one of the things now being a planner is I've got to let the customer talk, because you can tell I have no issue talking. I can I can keep talking for hours. Yeah, I think the mentorship. Wouldn't it be cool if Bixie or something like that did a mentorship program? I think that'd be awesome.
They have a mentorship program.
They do.
Yeah, they do. I reached out, or actually the lady that started it, I forget her name, Sarah, I think. She sent me her whole mentorship program, like the PowerPoint and everything, like all that outlined how it works, because we were going to do something together with LVN and Bixie. So they do have a mentorship program. I'm not sure what the status of it is right now, but there is one.
No, probably need some marketing. I didn't know about it. So yeah, when I'm there, I'm going to be asking about it and see what we can do to promote it, because
for sure,
I think it would be a great thing to do.
Absolutely. So I did have a kind of a funny question, and you already answered it, but you answered it incorrectly. And what is your what is your everyday carry? You told me some other kind of thing you carry. I don't know if you want to tell the audience like what your weapon of choice is, but what I'm talking about is like some snips or a flashlight. Like, what is your everyday tool carry?
Well, because I'm not an installation guy, then it's difficult to answer that question. And the reason why we're both laughing is this is America, and I think people are kind of surprised to know that I do have a concealed pistol license. But now I said that, I'm advertising it, but no. But for me, I do my cell phone with a camera. That's my go-to tool. Because sometimes I'm seeing stuff and I'm relaying it to a project manager. Yeah. Cell phone.
You've got this one, the S21 Ultra. It's too big for you apparently, but
with my little hands, it's down on the floor here, and yeah, it's a monster, this thing.
It's got the best camera system on the market, though. So
it does. It's a 108 megapixel camera in a 3x4 format. So
yes, beast.
It's kind of nice. But if I'm actually hitting the road and I'm going to do troubleshooting, my go-to tool is a click cleaner and an inspection camera.
Okay.
Because, like everyone says, the vast majority of the time, people don't have any inspection equipment. They have no idea what the interface is like. The click cleaner is very good, but if it's embedded on there, it's not going to remove it. So I think, to answer your question, first thing is cell phone. The second thing is inspection equipment for Interface Fiber.
Yeah. What about productivity tools? What apps are you using? Anything that's like a killer app for you?
Well, I'm going to date myself here. I'm struggling to keep up with all the technology. I mean, some of the things you're doing here at Low Voltage Nation is pretty impressive. Live on Facebook and what have you. I think, again, in terms of productivity, I use Teams. I live and die by Teams.
Yeah.
I like the fact that it's on my phone, it's on my computer. There's a camera. And no matter where I am or whatever time of day it is, I can respond. I am the global product manager. So my day started at 6:30 this morning with a call to India. And then later on today, there'll be probably a call to Australia. So rather than being tethered to my desk, it does give me the freedom to go out for a walk. And then if I have to take a call, then I can take a call. A great answer, but
Yeah. How are you doing with like Teams and Zoom meetings? Are you burnt out from them? Because I sure am.
Yeah, yes and no. I miss the say intimate contact. I mean, let's not get in trouble with the HR department here. It's it's still 2D. That's the trouble with this. Is
Yeah,
it's struggling. I'm doing okay, but I think our customers are burnt out as
I'm
well.
sure they are. Yeah.
Um, and it's very difficult to develop those personal relationships over a webcam.
Yep.
And I think that's what's missing. And my biggest concern, especially for the kids who learn social interaction at school and not going to school, I sometimes wonder, even as adults are learning, are losing our ability for social interaction and
We are.
appropriate social interaction.
I know that I am. I know that I'm having like even a more kind of weird, difficult time communicating in person. Over the past 2 years, it's declined. I don't like it.
Yeah. So, but at the same day, same time, is I'm extremely fortunate. Let's take a swig of the Kirkland water. I'm living the dream.
Yes, be
I
grateful. I love it.
I I got a visa to come here, and I became a citizen in 2018. I'll say it again. It's a remarkable country. It's been very, very good to me. It's not perfect. No country is, but it's home, and it's just been fantastic for me. And Fluke over the years has been extremely supportive. It hasn't all been smooth running.
Yeah,
So been
that's
nice to
awesome.
work with a company that's understanding. So yeah, it's been
Fluke,
great.
Fluke is like number one, aren't they? I mean, they're like the biggest company for like testing equipment. I mean, there's no other. I mean, there's competitors, but
There are there are competitors are definitely out there. I mean, when you talk about certain segments of the market, there he is using marketing terms again. When you talk about specific products, yeah, I mean, there are certain items like multimeters and certification testers. Well, yeah, we absolutely dominate the market. I'm not going to apologize for that. I mean, when you look at testing, it started off 1995 certification. I think I'm correct in saying the only manufacturer that's still around from 1995 in its original form is us. All the
Mm,
others have gone by the wayside, or they've been acquired and rebadged, and what have you. And how do we do that? Well, first of all, it's a very well run company. It's an extremely well run company.
seems like it.
But the second thing is we have the engineering here in Everett, and their obsession with perfection sometimes is a bit of a penalty. It means we're always
Mm,
last the market, but what we end up with is a really resilient tool. And I
yeah,
think just the support and the knowledge, a superb sales force, I think is the reason why we're still here after 25 years.
yeah. You're like the Apple of the structured cabling and testing market.
I'm not too sure I like that comparison since
Uh,
I'm an Android guy, but
oh yeah. Oh, thank you. People like I'm the only person in Nashville that has an Android phone. I feel like it. I get excluded from group chats. I get made fun of on a daily basis, but whatever.
well, we were joking with my marketing guy, and he said, if you want to get a debate going online, just talk about was it Velcro and cable ties, and it's the same thing here. Is if you want to get people just attacking each other, just start off which is better, Android or Apple. I mean, people are just
Oh
go
yeah.
at it. I'm I'm in my 50s. It's a phone. I make phone calls with it, and I talk to my 78-year-old mum in the UK on Skype on it. That's pretty much what I do on this phone.
I love it. So where can we find? I don't know if we even want to promote, where we can find you, but I know that you participate in LinkedIn. I've seen you on there. Is there anything that you want to kind of plug, or anything from Fluke that's coming out? What do you think?
No, I mean, it's networks.com or word, or you can just go to fluke.com and navigate to the networks division. There are a whole bunch of YouTube videos out there where you'll see my ugly mug. It's quite a few years ago now where I did, I think, 16 videos on using the Versive.
Oh,
I think
that's a
one of them
good,
actually has
cool.
45,000 views. whether that's good or not for such a niche product, I think that's pretty decent. Uh, but no, didn't really want to turn into a sales pitch today.
Yeah.
Kind of started off waving the new tool in front of you,
Yeah, yeah,
but it's kind of, I think it's important for people to understand, what it is, where it came from, thinking behind it.
So we'll see you at Bixie. That's going to be exciting. Are you participating in the Cabling Skills Challenge? You're a
I'm a
judge.
judge.
You're a judge.
Yes, I'm a judge. So the one thing I will say to that is I've been to Bixie since 2007, and I've never got involved in the Bixie Skills Challenge. They're off in the corner doing their own thing. When I did it for the first time a couple of years ago, I was nothing but impressed with the people that are willing to put their reputation on the line, step into that area, and go through all those tasks: copper punch downs, testing, splicing, polishing fiber connectors. It's not just one thing. I mean, the whole gambit. And they're under pressure, they're under time, they're on the clock. And if anybody who's ever done that is watching this, my hat goes off to you. That is extremely brave. So yeah, I'm the guy that's going to be judging how well you polished the connector, how well the mechanical connector was. So I'm going to be that guy, unfortunately.
You know that Lee Renfro won it twice. Did you know that?
Yep. I did not. No. Like I said, is my involvement in that only started a couple of years ago. And it's, like I said, it's off in the corner of the hall, but it's like, man, respect, total respect for people who go into that, going into the lion's den. Really intimidating. Sure.
Yeah, David Richards, he works for Chatsworth now, but he's the treasurer, I think, or he's the president-elect for Bixie. He's the one who started. I actually interviewed him on a podcast recently, but he started the Bixie Cabling Skills Challenge, and hearing him talk about like the whole thought process around it and his involvement is really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just really impressed that they actually get people willing to step into that arena. You may be good at one thing, but you have to do everything in that arena. So who wins it? This is not sitting down and doing a multiple choice exam. I mean, this is hands-on practical stuff. You got to have your A game that day. You really do.
We did a punch down competition, a Cat 6 punch down, and we used the vertical cable punch down tool. I don't know if you've seen that thing, but it speeds things up quite a bit. But I think the guy was 23 seconds for a punch down. I thought that was pretty incredible. I was like a minute 45.
Well, as long as his boss is not watching him, because it'd be like, wow, you can do 23 seconds. Let's see, you've got 144 connectors to terminate next week.
Exactly.
You should have that done within the hour.
Right. Right. We did it on video, and we submitted our video, so I don't know if there's any like speeding up or manipulating of it, but obviously you get multiple chances to enter it. But it's cool. Good times. Cool. Well, thank you, Adrian. This has been really, really insightful. I look forward to meeting you in person, and I appreciate just everything you've done coming up to this interview. And thank you for. We're going to do a giveaway of this thing, so stay tuned for that. We have an extra one. I'm going to hold on to this one, and then we're going to give away this one. So that'll be on TikTok and Instagram, and I think I might get Chuck Bowser. I don't know if you know Chuck Bowser. He used to.
I know Chuck because I worked at Leverton for 3 years. So
okay.
Chuck is a great course. Chuck would be your mentor. If you want to talk about trying to find a mentor,
yes,
Chuck would be it. Great guy.
Chuck is active in the Facebook group, and he's part of Low Voltage Nation. He's in our Slack, our paid Slack workspace, and he's the go-to guy. If we have questions about fire stopping or grounding and bonding or anything that has to do with a code, like is this how you do it, Chuck's our go-to guy. He's great. I love him. So I appreciate you coming on. We'll chat soon. Thank you, Adrian. Have a good one.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity.
Yep. Take care. Bye.
Bye.